So by 1610, you'll see that doesn't look like you can see that too well. Let me change the color here. Uh-oh. Better. So by 1610, the survivors were really preparing to seize a vessel and depart for England. But three ships arrived with 150 men. Now, of course, this has got to be one of the most miserable situations if you were a man to be on a ship with just a bunch of other men. And in fact, that's pretty much also how things were at the colony. It was very heavy on the male male end of things, pretty much all males. And of course, later on, in order to boost morale, they did bring over um, a shipload of women. We'll talk about that in a little bit. Now, this is something that, well, first of all, before we get to that, just real quick, the colony was named, this is when the colony was named Virginia in 1610. Okay. Now, the real crop, okay, and this is a question that I may ask on a test or an assignment, or you may have to write a little something about this, or maybe multiple choice. But basically, there are two crops that saved the colony. The one was corn, and we already talked about that. That was introduced by Native Americans. Even today, people in Europe, for the most part, do not eat corn. They'll feed it to their animals. And but another crop that saved Virginia was tobacco. And of course, you can't eat tobacco, but it was a cash crop. And this was a guy by the name of John Rolfe in 1612 began to experiment with different varieties of tobacco. And in England, it became kind of like the in thing uh, to to smoke. It kind of, it was kind of the in thing. It was sort of in vogue. A lot of upper, middle class people began smoking, and so then there was a market for tobacco, and so he experimented with some different types of tobacco. One was kind of the Indian tobacco, another was a Spanish variety, and he kind of brought those together, and so it became a big fad in England, and of course, people are still smoking cigarettes today. King James I did not like it at all. In fact, he called it a custom loathsome to the eye and hateful to the nose and harmful to the lungs. Anyway, he was really kind of ahead of his time, I guess, on that. But anyway, by 1619, it's a pretty important date here. All right. Three events. Sorry about the delay there. I had a little malfunction with my pen here. Three events were very important. All right. One was that the Virginia Company promised its settlers all the rights of Englishmen. All right, all. Now this is very important. All the rights of Englishmen. The S, there's the I. And this is very important because what we will find later on when we talk about the American Revolution, whoops, when we talk about the American Revolution, we'll see that at the beginning, they were not fighting for independence, although that's exactly what they started fighting for, but they were fighting simply for their rights as Englishmen. So that's very important. All right, number two, um, was a shipload of young, or when I say young, I mean marrying age, young women came to Jamestown. And basically, men are not motivated unless there are women around. And they've actually done studies on that in some of the former Soviet bloc countries when there's been a mass immigration, meaning with an E or an exodus of women, the men become very unproductive because unbeknownst to many women, men really are lazy. Men would really just like to sit around and do nothing, but they work because they want to find a woman in order to start a family and all of that. Okay, it's all kind of instinctive. Anyway, if we were in class, we could discuss this. This is the disadvantage of online classes. All right. Each woman was given to the man of her choice for 125 pounds of tobacco, the cost of her transportation. Because of their scarcity. When I say the women of early Virginia enjoyed the rights to property not enjoyed by the women in England, and this is something that you kind of see actually in America, and especially when we start getting into the frontier, people going out west. Uh, Women out west, I mean, this is where you start to see the beginnings of the women's movement. Because when you were out west, many of the women would do the same work as the men, and they were kind of looked upon as more equals. And the other major event in 1619, and we're not really sure exactly if it is 1619, but this was when the first slaves were brought to North America from West Africa. All right. Some came as indentured servants, but most came as slaves. Ironically, the Spanish had used the Indians, the Native Americans, as slaves, but because of disease, as we've talked about before, many of them would die. But the African slaves had stronger immunities to those diseases. Remember, they're kind of part of what we might call the old world today. All right, instead of the new world. Again, that is coming from more of a European perspective, and you'll hear me say that a lot. All right, remember, history is about perspective. All right. In fact, many people look at or define history as how the present, the now, how we view the past. All right. And again, and that's one of the most important things that you can learn in any history class is that it's all about perspective. So just because I say something, again, a lot of times it's kind of coming from my perspective, and that's not good. All right. I mean, it's good to get a little foundation, but remember, there are different ways of viewing all of these things. And so that was in 1619. I mean, one of the things that I want you to remember that's very important is that by 1619, the colony was firmly entrenched. Okay, so now we have a colony. It's Virginia, and it is going to survive. It wasn't just there was no there. How can I put this? I mean, we did obviously in 1619 they didn't know for sure it was going to survive, but it did. So this is it all started with Jamestown. All right. The first permanent colony that grew into Virginia. Now, it doesn't mean, like I said, that things were easy. All right, the Native Americans got tired. They started looking at the settlers, understandably, as a threat, and there were many wars. In fact, in 1622, there was a major war with the Native Americans, in which 1/3 of Virginia's population was killed. In the end, however, of course, the settlers would prevail, mainly again because of disease, all right, that affected the Native Americans. All right. So now what we're going to talk about is some other um, um, settlements, all right, that would occur in New England. And that will be our next